Hi everyone, I'm Mike Abadi and welcome back to VTblogosphereTV. It's episode number 33. It is May 23rd, another gloomy, rainy, late May day, but it sure is green. And we are very happy to welcome Sue Prent here. Sue's an artist. She lives in St. Albans, Franklin County, is represented today with her husband, and they do like life molding.
That's right.
You could give me like a tentacle apparatus on
we can actually do anything, from molds from the body. We can do anything at all. And my husband is the technical guy, and he can basically produce anything from anything.
Wow.
But our specialty is mold from life.
And that's Pink House Studios?
That is Pink House Studios.
In St. Albans?
In St. Albans and everywhere else.
Yay. Yeah, that's right.
By telephone.
Everything's international now with the internet. You are also a front pager at Green Mountain Daily.
I am.
I don't know how front page. Are you responsible for like certain days or certain weeks, or you have to generate?
No, actually,
what are your marching orders as a front pager?
I think we're all supposed to kind of step up when something needs to be done. We post as we feel like we should. As we have material to post, we post it. Really, nobody's poking a stick at us at all.
You don't have a quota?
No, no, not really. There are some people who sort of hang back because there are times in their lives when they have other things going on.
Right.
But we don't have a shortage of material.
Right.
There are plenty of big mouths among us. We're always got something to say.
Right. And you also have been an active member of Northwest Citizens for Responsible Growth. Did I get the name right?
That's right.
And how long has that organization been in existence?
Well, the Northwest Citizens started before my time. I've only been with them for 8 years. But the first incarnation it had a different name. I can't even remember what the name was, but it started in 1993 when the developers, the owners of the property, first decided that they wanted to put a Walmart onto a piece of prime ag soil at exit 20 in St. Albans town.
Right. It's about 20 minutes north of Burlington.
Well, it's more like 30 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was driving too fast. Sorry.
Right. We're about 7 miles from the Canadian. No, more like 12 miles from the Canadian border.
Okay.
And the first application was in '93. Make a long story short, that we had a very strong Act 250 at that time, with an environmental court, and not with an environmental court, with an environmental board that ruled against the Walmart. The developer appealed, and the Supreme Court of Vermont ultimately denied the permit. And they were given, I think, 10 months or something in which they could come back and modify the permit and apply again. And it would be processed. They chose not to do that, but 10 years later, in 2003, they came back. It wasn't the same people. It was the same people owning the property, but this time it was the developer, J.L. Davis, who is from Underhill, who wanted to do the development and had the deal with Walmart. So that's when the Northwest Citizens for Responsible Growth reformed, renamed themselves, and at that point I jumped on board.
Okay, so it was the same outfit, Walmart. It was the same piece of land.
The same piece of land.
But the developer changed, so that was considered a new permit?
Well, it was a new permit application because they had allowed the 10 months to lapse.
Okay.
But it's still, we argue that it still should have been denied. They should have been denied simply on the basis of settled law. Our attorney calls it res judicata, I think. That this was already, this fight had already taken place.
And had gone all the way up to the Supreme Court.
The decision had been made by the Supreme Court. And as I understand it, the idea of the law is that no individual or group should have to fight something twice.
Resubmit and resubmit until the other guy runs out of money is potentially what could happen.
Right, exactly. But what they did is they came back, they proposed it for the same piece of property. They had a different developer because they no longer were choosing to develop it themselves. And after a couple of years within the new application, they actually sold the property to J.L. Davis. So he must have had an option or something.
So the developer became the property owner.
Right, exactly. But not only did they propose it for the same site, but they proposed it an even larger project.
They scaled it up.
So they scaled it up,
Okay.
yeah, you know. And I think probably the logic in all of this was that when the first application went in, Governor Douglas had come into, Governor Douglas had not yet been elected. So they were under the original, they were applying under the original Act 250, which had a different structure, and obviously the political climate was different.
Mm-hmm.
When Douglas came in, I think the developer probably very realistically thought he had a much better chance of pushing this thing through. Act 250 itself had had a kind of a restructuring, so he went for it. You know, you can hardly blame the guy, you know,
right.
but you know, it's still, you know, we had to fight it.
So do you know the Walmart count in the state? I know there's one here, a little mini one in the Berlin Mall.
I think let's see, there's the one in Williston, there's the one in the Berlin Mall, there's one in Brattleboro.
Rutland?
Yeah, and I think there may be one in Rutland. I think it's 4.
Okay.
Yeah. There have been proposals for other locations, and none of those have actually taken off. And now we know, I think everybody has been reading in the paper that Walmart is changing its way of growing. They're not building gigantic stores anymore. They're building smaller, you know, markets in looking to locate in big cities where they have had no success breaking into the market. And, you know, the economy has affected their business. You know, we kind of suspect they may not be all that interested in this project anymore, but Mr. Davis certainly is.
Okay. And it sounds like it's their traditional way of doing things, the big monster,
Oh,
by
yeah.
the exit, by the interstate exit. This isn't
Yeah.
designed to be more integrated into a town.
No, but in fact, it is actually the town of St. Albans that sort of enabled this whole thing, because what they've done is they're turning their back on their traditional center, which is down at the bay, and they're looking to form new growth centers, 2 growth centers, a little different from the concept of the growth center that the legislature came up with. Two growth centers, one at each highway exit, which is really contrary to just about everybody's idea of how growth should be designed. And we're simply maintaining, we're not against Walmart particularly. It wouldn't matter what the store was. It could be a Canadian Tire for all, you know, for all we care. This location and the size are the problem. The loss of prime agricultural land, the environmental impacts, and the fact that really we should be concentrating on redeveloping all the underused land that's right in the heart of the city.
That's already the town.
And there's tons of empty developed property already in the heart of the St. Albans city.
Right.
And even in St. Albans town, there's underutilized area in the down by the bay.
Now, is Northwest Citizens for Responsible Growth found support from local, say, hardware stores, businesses?
We have quiet support. I mean, we have people who will, you know, say nice things to us when we come in, but they'll say it quietly because there's been a lot of threats of boycotts in the paper. I mean, it's been an ugly situation.
Like a flashpoint.
The ugliness coming entirely from the supporters of the project, and it has intimidated the local merchants. So we kind of have to do it on our own. I mean, it's, you know, I'm in a good position to be active and publicly active in the group, and several of the other people, because we just don't have retail businesses that can be impacted by this.
Right.
So we kind of take it on the chin for, you know, for the cause.
Right.
And, you know, we do find that it's really pretty much the same people coming out saying the ugly things over and over again.
Just poisoning the waters.
Yeah, you know, as the years have gone by, we believe that we're getting more and more support.
Great. Now, this saga continues to, I believe it was late March, the Supreme Court heard, now it was a permit appeal?
Well,
does that mean that they got their permit?
They did. They've gotten, they got their local permit, they got their Act 250 permit, you know, all their permits lined up.
In the 2000s, in this,
right.
this stretch of...
But we have a lot of issues with the manner in which they got their permits because there has been a pattern of conflicts of interest that happened in the local process, and we even have an issue that we are not pursuing at the Supreme Court about what we feel was some contamination of the Act 250 process. But we're not, you know, at a certain point, there were so many ways to challenge this project because it was wrong for the location and for the community in so many ways. At a certain point, you know, when you're facing a Supreme Court appeal, our attorney had to decide, had to choose a minimal number of criteria to bring before the Supreme Court. He chose 4. He had a limited number of words that he could file, even though, you know, like the 4 appeals were combined. So, you know, I think he did an amazing job in choosing what to focus on and in making his case. And I think there are a lot of issues involved. He chose 4 principal ones that probably will get, you know, quite a bit of traction, but principally the biggest one is certainly the conflicts of interest on the local level.
Okay, and that's select, or?
Well, the select board of the town appoints the development review board who issued the local permit, and on that first local development review board that issued the initial permit, there was a man wearing a hat that said St. Albans needs Walmart, sitting on the board, voting on the board.
Making it clear.
And then there was another person on that panel that signed a petition to advocate for the Walmart. So the first appeal we filed was back immediately after that development review board, that first development review board permit was issued. We challenged that on the conflicts of interest basis, and Judge Meredith Wright said, "You're absolutely right. You know, there were conflicts of interest. Your Supreme Court, your civil rights were violated. We would suggest to the town, if they want to avoid problems with this, you know, going down the road, that they vacate the decision," which they did.
Okay.
But we had said, and I think it's very clear that an entirely new board should be installed, and they didn't do that. They got rid of the guy with the hat. They got rid of the guy who signed the petition. But the other people who had all sat on this very contaminated board went on to permit it again.
Okay. Wow.
It's a long story.
I know, but so you were on record that long ago as saying that's a conflict of interest.
Yes.
And then it's come back up to the Supreme Court.
It's just gone on and on, yeah.
So there was oral arguments
there were oral arguments.
Early spring, I guess.
Yes, in March, and we expect a decision or an opinion on each of the aspects of the appeals sometime between now and maybe the end of the summer.
Okay, and they now the permit appeal is appealing their Act 250 permit.
Act 250 permit and the local permit. So it's a combined appeal. It's a combined,
because they need a number of permits.
Right, right.
Wow, that's a fight, huh?
It's been a fight, yes, it has been, and it's very important to get things right. And I think that's why the Supreme Court is taking their time to craft their opinion on each one of the findings.
Huh. So this is not necessarily an argument against Walmart, or do you feel like that Walmart in and of itself is worthy of putting the stop sign in front? I think Vermont was the last state to welcome a Walmart.
I'm not going to shop at Walmart.
You're not speaking for Northwest citizens right now.
For the Northwest, as far as the Northwest citizens are concerned, the feelings of the members run the gamut. You know, some people would be perfectly happy to have a Walmart in an appropriate location, of an appropriate size. You know, and as far as all that's concerned, if they were to come in downtown, as was proposed by the Preservation Trust of Vermont, and Preservation Trust of Vermont has developed a whole plan for redeveloping an underused parking lot in the center of the city, preserving the exterior facades and small businesses. Revitalizing downtown by having a small Walmart, something on the order of these ones that they're proposing for cities now.
Right.
And an interior parking structure, maybe a multi-story, like a two-story store. They spent a lot of time on this. I think they spent about a year coming up with the original plan, and then they went back and they also did a traffic feasibility analysis, and they came up with traffic fixes for it, everything. We would be very happy to support something like that, because that would, the number of square feet are very important in terms of how much of an impact a business will have. It can be, you know, a smaller Walmart coming into a downtown could end up being a tremendous economic benefit, and we're certainly going to support that. But at this point, that's not even under discussion.
Yeah, but it's amazing. It sounds like what you're saying is that Walmart now, in its model going forward, is actually scaled down, try to fit in better.
Yeah.
Like it's almost as though
they've changed.
The activists were like a generation ahead of Walmart in how to function in the world.
And what got me started in the whole thing really is because I grew up in Chicago. And when I was a kid in the 1950s, I watched the department stores, and they looked like they'd go on forever. Marshall Field's, Carson Peary Scott, Sears Roebuck, they were monoliths. And you know, you had the impression this was going to be a viable retail model forever.
Right.
And of course, you know, by the time I was, you know, in my teens, those big downtown department stores were being downplayed. Businesses were locating out in the shopping centers, the big, you know, plazas on the edge of town, and that was where all retail went. And later, the retail began to draw away from the shopping centers, and it went to the big boxes. Now we see it's going to the internet. I mean, it isn't difficult to see where things are going. And so when they first proposed this store the second time, the reason I got on board is because nobody could give me an answer for what would happen to that land when inevitably the big box store closed. And I said, you know, if you don't have a plan for returning it to, you know, production as an agricultural soil, you have no business developing it. So that was where that came from.
Do you know how big the parking lot is? I mean, I'm always struck by these massive
enormous.
places. Like they're larger than the store itself.
Yeah,
and
it's
the
enormous. I think at one time they said that the entire project would be about the size of, was it 5 football fields or something? And of course, you know, they go back and forth, you know, saying how wonderful it's going to be. It's going to be a completely new, it's always going to be a completely new concept. And then you see the picture, and it looks like every other Walmart you've ever seen. And they talk about how the lighting will be recessed, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that. And Governor Douglas came out and you know, shook everybody's hand and announced announced it like it was going to be the best thing in the world for St. Albans. And initially, people just took it at face value, and they thought, oh, well, this is going to be wonderful. We'll have another place to shop.
Right. Did they attach a certain number of jobs that would be
created? Initially they did. They tried. They talked about how there were going to be, I think they said 250 jobs there, but of course they don't talk initially about how many jobs are going to be lost as a result. And at this point, as of the point where we were, where the arguments were going before the environmental court, which was, you know, sort of the bottom line, everybody was agreeing there was going to be a net job loss. Even Mr. Davis's attorney was agreeing that there was going to be a net job loss. The only disagreement was about how many. And the conversations that go on have been built around saying there are going to be jobs created because, in fact, in the town of St. Albans, the very small town of St. Albans, there would be a plus of jobs from the Walmart. But it would be counterbalanced, way more than counterbalanced, with a loss of jobs countywide. And, you know, if the conversation is manipulated just the right way, and you know, people can have the impression that this is going to create new jobs, but it's not.
And I'll have choices as a consumer I didn't have before.
Yes, and of course we know that in fact what will happen is they will end up losing choices because the economy of the area is not big enough to support that number of square footage. And the places that fold are always the little guys.
Yeah, you're actually reminding me. I one time driving across country on I-80 in Wyoming, there was a Walmart supercenter with the supermarket sort of all in one thing, and it was clear that he just owned that town. Like that was where everyone went for everything, and it was really eye-opening to see what can happen.
It's like a company, the company store from old mining days in West Virginia. The only place to get a job is at the Walmart. You're paid so little that the only place you can afford to shop is at the Walmart. So, you know, it's a closed system, finally.
So we await the Supreme Court's decision sometime probably this summer.
We await the Supreme Court's decision.
Great. Now you've sort of, in a blog post, really enjoyed reading that as well as the comments because people came back on this issue. It was called an even more inconvenient truth. Looking at just larger issues of how we measure our success as an economy in terms of growth. And we have this, you know, I don't know, is it a burgeoning sustainability movement in this country that may be 10 or 20 years old? You know, there's a long tradition going back to George Perkins Marsh, Vermonter, in the 19th century. But just some of the larger issues of how our economy is set up in that post. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
I
sort of bigger than Walmart issues.
I guess one of the things that kind of struck me as being a problem with the conversation around the Walmart and around a lot of issues is the fact that the ideal seems to always be, the ideal model is always to grow. But we're not talking about necessarily becoming better. We're talking about expansion. You know, we're not talking about an economy becoming deeper and more sustainable. We're talking about it becoming, in a sense, broader and less sustainable, but it gives the appearance of growth. And, you know, one of the things that has affected us, we've discovered, you know, in the recent economic collapse, Wall Street was jerry-rigging a lot of the information that was going out to investors. You know, at the end of a quarter, they always try to make sure that there is evidence of growth, and that's the way they continue. That's their business model. It's all built around growth, and if people don't see growth, they leave the stock. And this is basically become the model that everything is based on. Growth is like the ultimate good, but of course, you know, we know from nature that unregulated and uncontrolled growth is cancer, and you know, it's not always such a good thing. We know that things go wrong when, you know, when populations explode, for instance, in areas that can't support them. I mean, there are plenty of models to serve as cautionary evidence about the fallacies around the concept of growth, but we're not very good at visiting that. And I just would like to put that conversation out periodically to say, yeah, you know, we hear our politicians talking about what's going to be good for growth and how important it is to grow, and but have we really, really thought about that to its logical end? And, you know, are we thinking of a growth in terms of breadth, but not in terms of depth?
Sure.
So,
we may not even be measuring the right things. You mentioned cancer, and that reminds me that you lived in Canada for a while.
I did.
And you experienced a universal single-payer health care system.
And it's the greatest.
Do you want
to
scare us with long lines and shoddy care? What's the line on the...
Well, I lived there for 11 years, and I have not seen any difference in terms of how long I have to wait to see a doctor. You know, I mean, I relatively good health. I have to be perfectly honest about this. I don't have a lot of health issues, and you know, I don't want to represent myself as having all the answers. But in terms of getting in to see your doctor for a regular appointment, or even when you have a minor issue and you have to go to a specialist, I see absolutely no difference, honestly, between my experiences when I was in Canada and when I am here, except for the bills. The cost is unbelievable. It is such a shock. I mean, when I was growing up in Chicago, we were covered by Blue Cross, so I knew about the idea of health insurance.
Right.
But all of my working adult life until I moved back to Vermont when I was 30, I had not had to worry about. That was the one thing I didn't have to think about. Yes, I had to pay my taxes, but you know, it was not, you know, it was never anything that seemed that onerous.
Right.
And the health care I received was great. I had wonderful relationships with my doctor. I always saw my own doctor. There were no limits on who I could see. They, you know, spent time with me. We were not processed in an inhuman way or anything like that. I had no problems with the health system in Canada.
And here in Vermont, as a small business, you've got to purchase your own out there.
Well, we're actually in a situation where we just can't afford to have employees. You know, you know, my husband and I do everything ourselves. Simply, we occasionally hire people on contract to do things because it's the only way that's feasible. We do not get enough income from our business to support more people.
Right. That's an interesting connection. I've heard that argument made that if we move to a single payer system, it could actually generate like a little economic boomlet at the very least.
Yeah, you know, I am absolutely, completely sold on single payer.
Do you have a good sense of hope that Vermont is going to lead the nation? You like how all the ducks are lining up here?
I am always hopeful. I am, you know, the 2010 election rendered me permanently hopeful. Not always satisfied, but permanently hopeful.
You're speaking state at the state level.
Yeah, at the state level. At the state level, yes.
Right. That is good news. I'm getting the word, Kenrick. We got like a minute, huh? All right. What's one thing that everyone needs to know about Franklin County that they may not know? That was ridiculous. Sorry.
Well, one of the things that I'm very much interested in doing right now is I'm trying to encourage women to run for office in Franklin County because having observed kind of informally that there's a tremendous overweight of men in local government in Franklin County, I think it's very important to balance that out and finally get some women running. So I have volunteered to help any woman that is a credible candidate and wants to run for office in Franklin County.
Uppity Chicks of Franklin County Unite. Is that right? Is that right?
Yes, Uppity Chicks of Franklin County.
I got it. Okay, good. I gave you a horrible handoff, and you did great things with it. So we are saying good evening, catching you up in the northwest corner of the state. Thanks for making the trip.
Welcome to our
fair
capital city. And good night, everyone.
President Bush, steady leadership in times of change.
I lead this country. I know what we need to do to make the world more free and more peaceful. I know what we need to do to make sure every person has a chance of realizing the American dream. I know what we need to do to continue economic growth so people can find work, to raise the standards in schools so children can learn, to fulfill the promise to America's seniors. Americans are hardworking, decent, generous people. I'm optimistic about America because I believe in the people of America.